Hi everybody, welcome to week 3 of your technical math course. This week we're going to be covering chapter 5. Chapter 5 is all about decimals. So we're going to be learning about the actual place values, so notation. We're going to look at how to round decimals. We're going to cover addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and those types of things. They're going to actually go through and show you the quote long way on how to do adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing of decimals. I do want you to make sure you understand the process, but also know that you can check this process with your calculator. So kind of use that as your backup, knowing that, in a lot of cases, you are going to probably go to the calculator. So you're not going to necessarily have to divide decimals the long way very often, but it is important to know that skill. You're also going to be looking at order of operations with decimals and putting decimals in order and changing decimals back into fractions, and then looking at different types of applications. So solving some equations. We're going to be looking at mean, median, and mode. So those are all some of the important topics that you're going to be covering in this week. I'm just going to point out a couple of key things before I leave you to the entire PowerPoint, because I just want to make sure that you notice a couple things as you go through this. First of all, let me pop on this. This is just a practical example of adding. So adding and subtracting decimals. This is an example of a checkbook. So that would be a practical example. Let's see. Let's take a look at another one. This is a geometry type of an example. We are finding perimeter. So perimeter is the distance around an object. So in this case, the distance around would be found by adding all those links together. Then the next topic that I really want you to kind of pay attention to is both the multiplying and the dividing by powers of 10. That's what this means when they say 0.1. So it's just like multiplying by 10. This is the 0.1 is dividing by 10. So I want you to make sure you pay attention to those two sections because that's going to be an important skill. Once you get the idea of how to do it by hand, the key with this one is to be able to do it in your head. So knowing when to move the decimal left and when to move the decimal right to multiply or divide by powers of 10. So that one's another really key skill that I want you to make sure that you pay some special attention to.
No.
Dividing when the number on the outside is not a whole number. Again, it's just more detail on long division. But again, know that in most cases, I do understand that you're going to grab your calculator and you're going to be doing this with a calculator. But it is important to understand the reasoning behind some of this so that you can judge when you're doing a real life problem. Things like, does this question, the answer that I got for this question, does it make sense? That's the important part of understanding these concepts, is knowing, does this make sense? Another important thing for you guys to pay attention to are these fraction to decimal conversions. There's going to be some specific ones that you're going to see a lot in the real world. Things like a quarter, a half, 3/4. And this is just an example of a table that has some of them in there. And so the idea is to start looking for patterns. What are some of the patterns that you see in the ninths, for example, which is what's in this table? So anything that's 1/9 is 0.1 repeating. 2/9 is 0.2 repeating. 3/9 is 0.3 repeating. So hopefully the idea here is that you start to see those patterns emerging when you're looking at changing fractions into decimals. And then they actually go through and show you how to do that, converting fractions to decimals. But again, I realize the fact that you're going to have a calculator, that's going to be your go-to most of the time. But the key is, again, just making sure you know how to use that calculator, and then to judge whether or not that answer that you got with your calculator makes sense. Last couple of things I want to point out is order of operations. Order of operations does not change when we are looking at problems with decimals. It's still the same as it was in our previous chapters. We always want to do the stuff inside parentheses first. Then we do exponents, then we do multiplication and division, and then we do addition and subtraction. So just because we throw decimals into the mix does not change the process. And then finally, in this chapter, you're going to be looking at some applications of all of these topics, how to use them in real life scenarios, like things like the checkbook, things like that. Of course, if you have questions at all after you review these slides and the material in the textbook, you can always call, text, or email. My number is 618-792-2293. Have a great week.